Hello there and welcome to Primetime News here on TV1. You're joining me, David Paldano. Now, before we head into your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines this evening.
Well-planned and far-sighted decisions have been beneficial, Buddhist Advisory Council tells the President. Former President responds to proposal on increasing term of presidency. Farmers in Madamulana affected by fertilizer crisis. Warnings of power cuts from Tuesday.
දැනට තියෙන තත්ත්වය අනුව අපිට පෙනී යන්නේ අගහරවල් ඉඳලා විදුලි කප්පාදුවක් වෙන්න තියෙන ප්‍රවණතාවය වැඩි කියන එක.
COVID-19, dengue and another virus spreading in Sri Lanka. Public urged to seek medical advice in case of a fever.
Now taking a look at your headline-making stories. The Buddhist Advisory Council emphasized that the country is experiencing the results of well-planned and far-sighted decisions. This was during a meeting at the Presidential Secretariat yesterday.
The Buddhist Advisory Council met for the 12th time yesterday.
Among all leaders who came to power after independence, we can call you as one of the country's leaders who faced a situation that is more serious than the 30-year-old war. If we consider the current situation that has arisen in the country due to COVID-19, you have provided reasonable solutions to the daily issues faced by the people. We wish to bestow our blessings upon you for that. We should thank you for another matter today. Usually it takes about 5 hours to travel from Kandy to Colombo, but today we travel through the expressway with ease.
We are not participating in this with political intentions. As the Mahasangha, we will extend our complete support and blessings to you to move forward in the next 3 years, regardless of the challenges that we will have to face.
සහාය ආශිර්වාදයේ පළ කරන බව මේ අවස්ථාවේ සඳහන්.
ඔබතුමාගේ ශාසනික සේවය.
We can't stress enough on your contribution to this faith. We respect the measures that you have taken to uplift temples and other places of worship.
සලකමින් ඒ කටයුතු ඔබතුමන් සිද්ධ කරනවා. ඒක අපි අගය කොට සලකනවා.
රටක තියෙන්න ඕන එක නීතියක්, රාජනීතිය.
We need one law in the country, but today we can't implement one law in the country. I wish to remind the President that we need a common law and not different laws for Muslims, Tamils and the Sinhalese.
අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමනි මම මතක් කරන්නට ඕනේ හැම වෙන්න ඕනේ කියන එක.
කූරගල පූජා භූමියට.
After visiting the Kuragala sacred site, you took steps to revive it. Through the measures taken by the Defence Ministry, hundreds of civil security personnel were involved in the project. They rendered a great contribution towards that. During the Yahapalna government, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe brought forward a proposal to convert that into an interfaith centre and took steps to implement that. After you came to power, you are building this as one of Sri Lanka's biggest religious places of worship. Surveying has been carried out to protect the Muhudu Mahaviharya. The relevant steps are being taken over that. You have done a great deal of service through the task force to protect archaeological resources in the eastern province.
කළමනාකරන බලකාය මගින් මේ කාල සීමාව තුල ඔබතුමාගෙන් විශාල කාර්යභාරයක් සිද්ධ වෙලා තිබෙනවා.
මිනිස්සු ජනාධිපතිතුමාටත් බයිනවා.
The people are scolding the President. They scold us as well. However, what we must highlight is that it was the President who created an environment for them to scold by providing the people 3 vaccines at a time when they were fearing for their lives.
මැරෙයි කියන බයෙන් හිටපු මිනිස්සුන්ට එන්නත් 3ක්ම ලබලා දීලා බණින්ට හරි කවුද සැලසුවේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා කියන එක පැහැදිලි කරන්න.
මම විශ්වාස කරනවා මම ප්‍රධානම.
I believe that one of the main reasons to elect me into power is to prioritize and protect the Sinhala Buddhist heritage in a way that it can't be destroyed. Although there were obstacles due to COVID-19 in the last 2 years, I extended my support towards this. That is why we deployed the tri-forces and civil security personnel to places such as the Sandahiru Saya, Digawapia, Nilagiri Saya, Muhudu Mahaviharya and Kuragala to carry out these projects.
ශේඛ බලකායේ විශාල සංඛ්‍යාවක් අපි යොදවලා තමයි මේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරන්නේ.
Yesterday, views were expressed in Parliament on increasing the President's tenure by 2 years. Former President Maithripala Sirisena responded to these comments today.
ජනාධිපතිවරයාගේ දූර කාලේ තවත් අවුරුදු 2කින් වැඩි කරන්න කියලා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඩයනගමගේ ප්‍රකාශ කළා.
ඩයනගමගේ මම කියන්නේ මොකක් හරි පොඩි ඔළුවේ අසනීපයක් ඇති.
I feel that Dana Gamage has some mental ailment. Shouldn't she know the president's stance on that? There is no point in Dana telling us. Therefore, I don't believe the president is of that view. It has never happened in Sri Lanka. You know what happened to J.R. Jayawardena after extending the tenure of the president by removing electoral restrictions. As far as I know, no one will make such a decision.
Journalists questioned Minister Namal Rajapaksa on the views to extend the president's term in office.
There is nothing like that. We will conduct the election at the right time. In the political history of Mahinda Rajapaksa and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, we don't hope to postpone the elections. As a government, we will serve justice for the people over the next 3 years.
Opposition parliamentarians expressed these views on the suggestions to extend the tenure of the president.
If they believe that a person who couldn't do anything for 2 years is capable of doing it in the next 3 years, that is a joke. At the end of 5 years, they will say he was unable to do it during his first stint and he will do well in the next 5-year stint. The era of being deceived by these remarks are over. Their comments on doing something in the next 3 years, although it hasn't been done in the past 2 years, is a joke. They did nothing apart from showing their stubbornness and stupidity. Although they hope to be in power for the next 3 years, will there be room for that? No, the time has come for the people to rise up and topple this government.
The stance of the JVP.
They are telling things that have never been told in foreign nations. They are blaming COVID-19 for everything and saying they need 2 more years. They can make various comments as individuals, but there is no law like that. Did they lose their backbone to control rice prices because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Was the organic fertilizer crisis created by COVID-19? They brought forward the election and showed their might. They bragged about that at the time. Now they are afraid of elections. They preponed it knowing they will win the election. When they delay elections, some people realize that the government is in dire straits. Can't they conduct a parliamentary election soon? This is the question in everyone's minds. If we wait for 3 more years, they would have sold off and destroyed the country.
What is the current situation with the power crisis in the island? We will bring you more stories on that. Stay tuned after this small commercial break. Welcome back to the news. Power generation at the Sapugaskanda plant was halted as it ran out of fuel this afternoon. The Ceylon Electricity Board says there is no need to impose power cuts during the weekend as the electricity demand is low. But the CEB says there is a likelihood of power cuts being imposed from Tuesday. Authorities say the power cuts would be imposed as power plants are running out of fuel.
The Sapugaskanda power plant that generates 105 megawatts of power halted power generation after it ran out of fuel this afternoon. For how long can the active power plants generate power? The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation supplied 10,000 metric tons of diesel to the Kalanithissa power plant last morning. This would be enough to generate electricity for 6 days. The barge-mounted power plant at the Colombo port received furnace oil yesterday. CEB spokesperson Andrew Naumani said this would be enough to generate power for 3 days. Will power cuts be imposed in the country? CB spokesperson Andrew Naumani said there would be no need to impose power cuts during the weekend as the electricity demand is low during this period. However, the situation may change next week. We might have an issue with supplying about 50 megawatts of the total power requirement on Monday. That wouldn't have a massive impact to the extent of having to impose power cuts. But the situation will change by Tuesday because we won't be able to supply 163 megawatts on that day. There will be an issue in meeting the full demand. They say we might receive furnace oil in March. But then again, we have a problem of foreign exchange to pay for the letters of credit.
දැනට තියෙන තත්ත්වය අනුව අපිට පෙනී යන්නේ අඟහරුවාදා ඉඳලා විදුලි කප්පාදුවක් වෙන්න තියෙන ප්‍රවණතාවය වැඩි කියන එක.
What are the views of the Minister of Power? If the Kalanthissa power plant is reactivated by the 25th, we won't have to impose power cuts. That is why we have proposed to keep street lights on from 6:30 to 11 p.m. and to keep them switched off until morning. Otherwise, we can keep street lights switched off until 10 p.m. and keep them on from 11 p.m. until next morning. As houses will be open between 6:30 and 10:30, there won't be an issue when switching off street lights. The fertilizer crisis is continuing to aggravate in the country, leaving farmers helpless and potentially affecting the country's food supply. Although the government continues to maintain its organic fertilizer policy, permission has been granted to import chemical fertilizer. However, the rising cost of imports has caused fertilizer prices to rise significantly, leaving them with no fertilizer. Farmers say they are grappling with two issues at present. They lament that they are unable to begin farming for the upcoming yellow cultivation and that their harvests have declined this season. A stock of organic fertilizer imported from China's Qingdao Seawing Biotech company was rejected over issues relating to its standards. But the government has paid $6.9 million to the Chinese company. A controversy arose over nano-nitrogen liquid fertilizer imported from India after revelations were made in Parliament on a fraudulent deal. Farmers have been at the receiving end of these problems as they continue to face multiple issues. This is what farmers in Madamulana and Kinchigune in Hambantota have to say.
කොම්පොස්ට් කොට 10 ගහුවා ඒකෙන් කිසිම ප්‍රතිඵලයක් නැහැ. මේ වාහන මහත්මයා දවස් 40ක් වෙන මේ ගොයන් ගහයි සයිස් එකෙන් මේ කුඹුරෙන් වියමුණු 60 75 මං ගත්ත කුඹුර අපේ අප්පුච්චිලාගේ මුත්තලාගේ කාලේ ඉඳලා වැඩ කරගෙන කාපු කුඹුර අපේ පරම්පරාවම ජීවත් වුණේ මේවා කරගෙන මේ පහුගිය කාලේ පෝර නැතිවීමත් එක්ක මේ කුඹුර වගා කරගන්න විදියක් නැතුව අතෑරලා දාලා තියෙන්නේ. හද්දමාරුවේ වැටලා තියෙන්නේ.
About 500 families earn a livelihood through the cultivation of paddy in Madamulana.
අක්කර 422ක් විතර පමණ මේ උරුබකු ව්‍යාපාරය යටතේ වැඩ කෙරෙනවා. ගිය කන්නවල අක්‍රයකින් විය මුණු 100ක් 22ක් වගේ පස්සුවපු ගොවි මහත්තුරුන්ට අද වෙලා තියෙන ඉරණම තමයි මේ. අපේ ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ පියත් මේකේ කුඹුරක වැඩ කර කර ඉන්න කාලේ තමයි නාම යෝජනය ඇවිල්ලා වක්කොඩෙන් අත හොදන ගිහින් බාර දීලා කියලා. නමුත් එතුමා කරපු මෙහෙවරටත් අද උනේ මොකද්ද? එතුමාගේ දරුවන් රටේ ජනාධිපති වුණා. ජනාධිපති වෙලා මෙන්න අද පත් කර ඉරණම.
Farmers have begun harvesting paddy in the eastern province. These are paddy fields in Sirudengal in Batiklo. 900 acres in Sirudengal were used for paddy cultivation this season. Why would we need to import rice? The rice that we can harvest is being imported from overseas. We have been severely impacted by the move to import organic fertilizer, and now they are trying to provide us with imported rice. They say rice has been imported from India, but we won't be able to live in peace until this government is in power.
State Minister Indi Kanarudda commented on the crops that have been cultivated using organic fertilizer.
Some farmers point out that they have reaped a good harvest. We know that crops cultivated using organic fertilizer don't turn blue, but sometimes the harvest may have dropped by about 10 or 15%. If paddy is brought at 50 rupees, it will be sold at more than 80 rupees.
The State Minister made these remarks during an event to purchase turmeric harvests from farmers. The event was organized by the Spices Marketing Board. Some cultivators who attended the event expressed the following remarks.
අපෙන් 150ට 130ට අරගෙන ඒගොල්ලන් 7-8ට විකුණනවා. ඒක අපිට කරන්න බෑ. එයාලා තමයි පාඩි භෝගිකයට අඩු කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒගොල්ලන්ට පාලන මිලක් දාන්න ඕනේ. පාලන මිලක් තියෙනවනේ මේ මුදලාලිලා. ඒගොල්ලන් ගන්න කැමති මේ දැනටත් තියෙන එක තමයි. දැන් ගොවි අතරේ දාන්නේ තියෙන්නේ.
Farmers are helpless. We brought turmeric seeds after pawning our jewelry. We brought seeds for 700 rupees. What can we do by selling it for 160 rupees? There is no point if we can't even cover our expenses.
The government had purchased a kilo of turmeric at 165 rupees from farmers.
The people in this country are unable to sell their turmeric harvest. Large-scale businessmen are coming forward to import turmeric from India. I seized 34 containers of turmeric at the port. I told most of them that I wouldn't allow it into the country even to be re-exported. Some were taken away while some were burnt. Now Sri Lanka is self-sufficient in terms of turmeric.
While the country is experiencing a fertilizer crisis, inflation in the country has increased as well. The data of the central bank shows that inflation in December last year had hit 14% from 11.1% in November 2021. Food inflation increased to 21.5% in December 2021 from 16.9% in November 2021. How is the prevailing economic situation in the country affecting the people? Consumers have been severely impacted by the prevailing economic situation. Traders say essential items are being sold at high prices. Several people who visited the market over the weekend were not satisfied when they returned to their homes.
ආර්ථික කළමනාකරණය කියන එක මදි. මොකද මේ රජයත් එක්ක රජයක් නෑ වගේ තමයි මේ යන්නේ දැන් යන තත්ත්වය අනුව.
Foreign Minister G.L. Piri said financial support has been obtained from foreign countries to deal with the economic crisis the country is facing. The minister made these remarks as he called upon the Mahasangha today.
India has agreed to provide us with a credit line of $2.5 million after Finance Minister Basil Rajpaksa visited New Delhi for discussions. We cannot solve this problem alone. There is no need to do so. Our relationship with India is important. China will give us 1 million tons of rice before the Sinhala and Tamil New Year. This will be a great support for us. We cannot agree to such deals if it will further affect the people, but there is no harm in discussing them. It is better to disagree with certain conditions that cannot be fulfilled. Certain investors are not interested in working with us because they are not satisfied with the return they will obtain from the deal. But these investors are important to maintain the economic stability of our country.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says the Samagi Jana Balawege will protect the 22 million people in the country instead of protecting its close friends. The opposition leader made these comments during a district meeting of the Samagi Taruna Balawege.
Samagi Jana Balawege රජයක් තුළ පැහැදිලිව කියන කැමති හොරා කාපු සල්ලි ටික යවතක් කරා රටේ සංවර්ධනය රටේ සෞභාග්‍ය අපි යොදවනවා කියන එක.
I would like to say that when Samagi Jana Balawege comes into power, we will recover the money that was looted from the people and use it to develop our country. Was there a motive behind releasing substandard gas to the market? Was there a motive behind the move to suspend the importation of fertilizer? What was the motive? They created alternative solutions and looted dollars through that. 1.8 million farming families of our country were severely affected by the government's move to line their pockets. We will bring that era to an end. We will launch a youth charter in the future. A special council will be established as well. We will call that the Youth Advisory Council. Representatives will be appointed from the 25 districts and 9 provinces of the country. A new program will be implemented where the input of the youth will be prioritized when deciding on government policies and other decisions.
Sri Lanka is a few days away from celebrating its 74th year of independence. But what exactly does that independence mean?
Remember, an agreement hurriedly signed to sell shares of the Kerawalapitia power plant to a US company named New Fortress Energy. Remember, the Hambantota port, situated along the world's busiest sea route in the Sea of Sri Lanka and one of Sri Lanka's most valuable assets, leased for 99 years to China. Remember, the Colombo port's West Container Terminal goes to India's Adani, despite protests that halted Indian control of the East Container Terminal. Remember, the port city, built by a Chinese company and situated right next to Colombo's business hub, gets special opportunities and privileges by way of an act of parliament. Remember, 15,000 acres of land near the world's best natural harbour, Trincomalee, vested with an Indian JV. In a deal that nobody knows what the land has been valued at. How have all of these deals and decisions ultimately benefited ordinary Sri Lankans? The rising cost of living and the soaring national debt is crippling the economy and the lives of the people. And all of this while, a Chinese ship with substandard fertilizer is allowed to roam around the sea of Sri Lanka and then claim and get millions of dollars in compensation. While Sri Lanka readily paid this compensation, has Sri Lanka been able to claim and receive adequate compensation from the Express Pearl disaster? Sri Lanka gained independence after a long struggle for freedom that began from the Battle of Uvavellassa in 1818. Ordinary Sri Lankans shed their blood to win our independence. Independence is not just a word or a phrase. It is a right the people of Sri Lanka are born into. And that right cannot be usurped by temporary custodians of power, whatever political party they belong to. Sri Lanka belongs to Sri Lankans. Let's remember that as we edge closer to our Independence Day.
We're going in for another short commercial break. Stay tuned for more of the very latest.
Some days you might be feeling down and you want to talk to someone. Video channel a licensed psychiatrist on ODOC from the comfort and privacy of your home. ODOC is by your side, always.
Welcome back to the news. Sri Lanka's Foreign Ministry says Human Rights Watch has shown an exaggerated and negative picture of the human rights situation in the country.
Human Rights Watch had published its annual report recently outlining the deteriorating human rights situation in Sri Lanka. But in a statement, the Foreign Ministry said it is important to engage in responsible, balanced and impartial reporting. It added that Sri Lanka constructively engages with the international community and recognizes human rights defenders. The Foreign Ministry said it had written to Human Rights Watch highlighting their recent progress over several matters. This includes amending the Prevention of Terrorism Act and releasing detainees under these laws. The statement read that Sri Lanka has empowered independent institutions to deliver post-conflict reconciliation, accountability and human rights. It added that Sri Lanka values the advice and goodwill from international partners and will continue their ongoing interaction with them. In its report, Human Rights Watch said the government has continued to harass and threaten victims and lawyers and groups representing them. It said intelligence agencies and the military have been interfering in the work of civil society organizations.
The 2021 Grade 5 Scholarship Examination was held today.
The Department of Examinations said 340,507 candidates sat for the 2021 Grade 5 Scholarship Examination this year. 255,062 candidates had sat for the exam in the Sinhala medium, while 85,445 sat for the exam in the Tamil medium.
පහුගිය අවුරුදු දෙකක් තිස්සේ ඉස්කෝලේ මගහැරිලා කොරෝනාත් එක්ක ගෙදරට වෙලා තරමක් අපහසුයෙන් තමයි දරුවෝ වැටි කරගත්තේ. ඒ වුණාට හැබැයි කාලේ ප්‍රමාණවත් වුණා අවසානයේ තමන්ගේ අතපසු වෙච්ච පාඩම් කටයුතු සම්පූර්ණ කරගන්න.
ගුරුවරු ඔන්ලයින් එකේදී ගොඩක් මහන්සි වුණා. කැපවීමක් කරා.
කොහමද අපි ඉස්කෝලේ මේ අපි සරලයි ටීචර් බොහොම උනන්දු වෙන වැඩේට මේ මොකද මේ ඊයේනකන් ඒක පන්ති කරයි.
The Department of Examinations had allocated examination centers for candidates who have been infected with COVID-19. A student infected with dengue sat for the exam at the Maliyadeva Model College. She was receiving treatment at the Kurunagala Teaching Hospital. 23 students of the Mahabodhi Vidyalaya in Colombo 10 who were infected with COVID-19 sat for the scholarship exam today. Commissioner General of Examinations LMD Dharmasena said the exams were held at 2,943 examination centers. This included 108 centers for candidates infected with COVID-19.
Now on to another one of your headline-making stories. Health officials are urging parents to direct their children for treatment if they fall sick. This comes amidst rising COVID-19 and dengue infections in the country.
By today, there are about 40 children receiving treatment at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for COVID-19. About 10 infected children are admitted to the hospital daily on average. If your child has symptoms, bring them to the hospital and produce them to the doctor. Don't wait until the condition worsens. Health officials say that dengue is spreading among children as well. Dengue is spreading rapidly these days. We can confirm whether a child has been infected by dengue only after a medical examination. A doctor will decide whether the child can be treated at home or at hospital. Therefore, if your child has symptoms such as fever, cough and cold, you must definitely obtain medical advice. The National Dengue Control Unit says 5,975 dengue cases have been reported in the country so far this year. The Western Province, with more than 3,200 cases, accounts for more than half of the total cases. 1,558 cases have been reported in the Colombo district. The National Dengue Control Unit told Newsfirst it is yet to identify the number of infected children. State Minister Professor Channa Jayasumna has urged the people to seek immediate medical assistance if they develop fever, as COVID-19, dengue and another virus are spreading in the country. These three diseases are causing similar symptoms among the people. Therefore, doctors are facing difficulties to identify the disease. They have pointed out that patients arrive late for medical treatment. Don't ignore fever these days.
No one in this world needs an elephant tusk other than an elephant. All across the world, hundreds of elephants are killed in various illicit ways to gain various malevolent outcomes. An event titled Commemoration of Worldwide Vigil for Elephants in Solidarity was held at the Diyatha Open Air Theatre in Battaramulla this evening in remembrance of the elephants who lost their lives in the year 2021.
The event was organized by the Global March for Elephants and Rhinos in partnership with Rare Sri Lanka for the third consecutive year.
Today we aim to create public awareness, street play and songs for conservation, welfare and rights of elephants.
The event started off with religious observances by the Mahasangha commemorating the elephants who lost their lives last year. The event also included many entertaining acts to raise awareness among the general public on conservation, welfare and the rights of elephants.
Celebrated poet John Donne once said that an elephant is a masterpiece of nature and an elephant is a magnificent, harmless creature in the nature. Quite contradictory to this statement, a massive number of elephants are being killed either by torture or captivity across the world, and here in Sri Lanka by hakkapatas, poisoning their food, and by electrocution. What can we do as Sri Lankans to save these elephants?
Elephants in Sri Lanka and humans have a long history together. In modern times, this ancient relationship has got extremely complicated because of an inability to share the landscape or these islands' remaining wilderness areas. As long as we are insensitive to the needs of elephants, this conflict will continue to increase. The cruel methods that people employ to kill elephants, like hakkapatas, even some of the snares that are put where baby elephants get caught, these are things that really need to be seriously addressed by governments.
A candlelight vigil was also held towards the end of the event in respect of the elephants who died last year.
The North Central Province competition of the Sri Lanka Vanita Abhimana 2021, organised by Newsfirst and NDB Bank, were at the Polonnaruwa City Centre today.
Sri Lanka Vanitha Abhimana 2021, organised by Newsfirst and NDB Bank, aims to empower women in Sri Lanka. Newsfirst has engraved an indelible mark in the people's hearts as Sri Lanka's largest and most trusted news brand. Today, Newsfirst is fulfilling its social responsibility by going beyond the ordinary boundaries of journalism. The North Central Province competitors of Sri Lanka Vanitha Abhimana 2021 were at the Polonnaruwa City Centre today.
It has been predicted that if the contribution of women is utilized properly in the country by 2025, it will contribute $20 billion to the GDP. However, women face many challenges when moving forward as employees and as entrepreneurs. We must identify new opportunities for women. Let us give the women of this nation the responsibility of helping the country out of this crisis.
The competitors under the Vanitha Abhimana program are held under 10 categories. This includes entrepreneurs, young leaders, voluntary services, education, sports and environmental management. Workshops and conferences are among the other programs held as part of the program. The competition in the Eastern Province will be held in Batticaloa next week.
The Sri Lanka Malay Association Centenary Commemoration was inaugurated today.
The Sri Lanka Malay Association Centenary Commemoration was inaugurated in Colombo today. All activities planned for the year 2022 were initiated at the event. Ambassador of Indonesia, the High Commissioner of Malaysia and several other dignitaries attended the event.
So we end today again with the theme song that heralds in this year of celebration at the SLMA.
The official Sri Lanka Malay Association Centenary Year theme song was also launched during the event. The Malays have contributed much to the development of the nation through the administrative service, the plantation and estate sector, academia, corporate governance, sports, the arts and media, the Triforces, police, the fire brigade and through many other professional fields.
And now on to international news. Around 90 tons of United States lethal aid has arrived in Ukraine amid tensions over Russia's troop buildup on the border. It was the first shipment of a recently approved package of US military aid for Ukraine and included ammunition for frontline defenders. Russia's foreign minister and his US counterpart also held talks yesterday to try and reduce the chance of a wider conflict in Ukraine, even though Sergei Lavrov has repeatedly denied that a huge Russian force assembled near Ukraine's border would be used to invade Ukraine. Now, what exactly happened during this high-level discussion? Newsfirst's Sanitha Senanaika filed this report.
As tensions mount between Russia and the West over Ukraine, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met yesterday. With accusations and denials coming from both sides, yesterday's high-level talks came to an end with Russia's foreign minister claiming that the documents presented by the American delegation as blatant lies.
These papers that the State Department prepared specifically for today's meeting, they're impossible to read. Well, we have special divisions headed by official ministry staffers. It is their duty to study all of that, and a response has already followed. I don't think it needs any further comments. You could be flipping through it and open it at any page at random to be convinced that none of it holds up to any kind of critical analysis. And in majority of cases, it's simply blatant lies.
Критического анализа, и просто в большинстве случаев это чистая ложь.
Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that yesterday's talks with his Russian counterpart were frank and substantive and warned of massive consequences should Russia decide to invade Ukraine.
This was not a negotiation, but a candid exchange of concerns and ideas. So that's the choice that Russia faces now. It can choose the path of diplomacy that can lead to peace and security, or the path that will lead only to conflict, severe consequences, and international condemnation. The United States and our allies and partners in Europe stand ready to meet Russia on either path.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom Boris Johnson said an incursion into Ukraine would be a disaster for Russia and for the world.
Look, be in no doubt that if Russia were to make any kind of incursion into Ukraine on any scale, whatever, I think that would be a disaster for, not just for Ukraine, but for Russia. It would be a disaster for the world. And the UK stands squarely behind the sovereignty and integrity of Ukraine.
Pro-Russian rebels control large parts of eastern Ukraine since a war broke out 8 years ago. Some 14,000 people were killed and 2 million have fled their homes before a peace agreement was brokered.
The US and its allies have threatened new sanctions if the Russian military takes action and is expected to put its position in writing next week. With an estimated 100,000 Russian troops deployed near Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin has issued demands to the West, which he says concern Russia's security, including that Ukraine be stopped from joining NATO. Meanwhile, Russia, Iran and China began a joint naval drill in the Indian Ocean yesterday aimed at boosting security at sea. Russia's Ministry of Defense said 14 ships took part, including 3 Russian ones. NATO's 30 members, including the United Kingdom, United States and several former Soviet Union states which share a border with Russia, agree that an armed attack against one is an armed attack against them all, and they will come to the aid of one another.
The United Nations has condemned an airstrike on a Yemen detention center that has killed more than 70 people.
An airstrike hit a detention center in Yemen, which is a stronghold of the Houthi movement, killing more than 70 people. Speaking at a media briefing, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, quote-unquote, the escalation needs to stop.
What we need is to stop this vicious circle in which things get escalating one after the other. What we need is to have, as we have been proposing from long ago, a ceasefire together with the opening of harbor and airports, and then the beginning of a serious dialogue among the parties. This escalation needs to stop.
But in a statement published today, the Saudi-led coalition fighting Houthi rebels in the country denied it had carried out the airstrike. It said the site was not on a list of targets to avoid that had been agreed with the UN and had not been reported by the Red Cross. Footage released by the Houthi showed rescue workers pulling bodies from out the rubble. Reports show that at least 70 people were killed and 138 others were wounded in the attack.
A sizable portion of taxpayer funds are used for road development projects in the country. However, concerns are being raised on the quality of these projects. The people of Hambegamo took to the streets today, citing that a project to develop a main road in the village is not of proper quality. We leave you tonight with this story. For the Newsfirst team, I'm David Paldano, along with our sign interpreter for tonight, Taraka Gabriel. Take care and good night.
The Hambegamo Sinugala main road that runs for 1.5 kilometers benefits the people of Watamada and Ratambalagama. Residents who pointed out that the road is being refurbished without a drainage system staged a protest demanding the road to be developed in keeping with proper standards. Raw materials and machinery that were brought to the area to lay tar on the road was taken away due to protests by residents. The protesters dispersed after the police intervened and promised to organize a meeting with officials of the Road Development Authority on Monday.